Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Wednesday. It is February 14th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and it was all uphill today, really. Early on in the overnight, we had this little sell-off here, and then we found a low, and it was all uphill from that point on. This one's a little bit too steep, and so then we kind of fell off a little bit. This one's a little bit too flat almost, and you notice how we're swinging back and forth above and below the EMA now. And then about 11:30 or so, we started higher again. So one thing to take note of, somebody else actually asked me about it. There is a little two-legged move in here. We had a break, a couple legs up to a new high, and then a little two-legged move, and a lot of times that will be the center point of the pattern. And so what you want to do is measure your first leg up, and then from that point on, see if maybe you get a second leg. We didn't quite get there. You can see we came up a little short. Actually, I already had that arrow up there, don't I? But that's something to think about. That at least gives you a clue that we may be going higher. But that's the bigger picture for the day. And of course, there's this shorter term trends in here. You really only trade up from this point on. I do have one short in here. I'll talk about that one. And of course, once we had the break and the new high, then I put another. There is another short in here. But you got to be careful about taking shorts in an uptrend. I marked these two. From here on, it was probably okay if you saw a good setup. There weren't really any. Most of them were buys off the lower trend line, the lower key entry point. And there were some pretty good buys in here. But let's back out, and we'll talk about the trades, and we'll wrap the day up. It's a little late. I meant to get this done much earlier, so I'm a little late getting this done today. So I won't linger around and talk too much. I'll go through the trades pretty quickly and we'll wrap it up. But just into the 7 o'clock hour, we had this huge sell-off. You got to be real careful in here. I'd just stay out of any of this. Of course, that's early. 7 o'clock hour is right in there somewhere. Right in here. We were just kind of going sideways when that hit. But then we had this move up and this big, huge sell-off. And I really don't see a good way to get in that. So here there's it's a first entry. It's a pretty bearish bar off that key entry point, so you might consider entering there. But there's not a whole lot of room to that low there, so I'm not even crazy about it. I think you're better off just to sit on the sidelines and wait for a better setup. And then, of course, you get down here and you finally get a break outside. You get a first entry. There's really another little push down. But this is still all the same move. So this is like a double top, a double test of that level. Really, I would count that as two legs back, a second entry short. So I like that one. That's steep. So we were overdue for a little correction. And notice how many times we turned down right across that spot. I bet we hit that line once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, really, before it turned down. So that's a good place to consider a short. We aren't quite back to the EMA, but trying to go higher that many times and not getting there. You can see that I'd really have that right across that level, and you can see we tested it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different times, really 5 by the time you got that short. And that is a double bottom, so not only is it a second short like that, but if you count that as a double bottom, then it's a first entry, second entry short. So you get a second entry short a couple of different ways there. Double test of the resistance up there. And so that's a nice short. And then we bounce again. We really were just in a little trading range here. I don't see any reason to consider going long here. I think it's too dangerous. So when it bounces, you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry short here, but that's not a very good setup. But when it tries to go higher again, and you get that failed second entry long and that nice bearish bar after a failed break out of this range, I like that one. it's good for a couple of points, and then it bounces. Notice that if you draw that trend line off those first couple swings there, and then that first close, and then it bounces again, and there it does tick lower right there is the reason I like that one. Of course, that's a huge bar. We've talked about that several times this week. That's not uncommon. You might try an alternative way to get in. So you could have gotten in a little better by dropping a limit order. It did come back, but I don't know if you want to. That's not one that I really like to wait on it to come back there. So if you don't enter off this bar, I probably wouldn't enter there. You could have let it break higher and dropped it a few ticks back in there and maybe gotten filled, but I'm not sure exactly how many you could have gotten filled. There is a higher low here. Again, it's a huge bar though, but you know, you would be expecting a possible measured move, and that puts you back up here near the upper trend line, right where it went. So you might consider it again. And then of course we come back and you get a little close outside here. You tried to go lower. It's not back to, that's twice we haven't come back to the key entry point, but it's still a possibility, just because notice what happens here. There's a new low and then a first entry. You've got two measured legs up, and that's still part of a second entry down. And you might have actually considered going short there more than you would going long. I didn't mark it because we weren't back to the key entry point, and I didn't like really going short because we seem to be working higher now. And there is a trap there. So you could argue for that one right there, and if you took it, I wouldn't have any problem with it, but it is aggressive. But I'd be thinking looking for a long here, and that's why I kind of like this one. When it turns down and doesn't go, but maybe a little more than a point and then turns up, maybe you go long there. But again, it's aggressive. Of course, we're moving up, and now you're just bouncing off these highs. I would wait on a chance to get long. We finally get back. We finally come off the high, and it's two legs back to the key entry point trend line. And I don't like that first bar. This one's not too bad, and it actually goes higher than that one. So if we get another break above this one, then that's probably a pretty good sign, especially it being a key entry point. But I would want your stop has to go below. Let me make this bigger. That's just a little hard to see. Your stop has to go below that little 2-bar matching low right there, because that's the swing low. And this is a double. This is a low spot. You tested it once, now twice. You've actually tested it a few times. And there's actually a low right there. And so there's a first entry when it goes lower, and then it goes higher, and there's a second entry. And so you could treat that like a failure. I definitely wouldn't want to get short anywhere in there. And off it takes. You get a higher low here, but look at it just going sideways. I'd skip that. And then, of course, now look what happens. You make this high, first entry, pull back second entry. And I like that one simply because we've had this break, and we tried to go higher twice to make a new low and failed on this short-term trend line. But again, it's like a repeat of this right here. It's just a little smaller, and it repeats it. So it's probably going to, you know, end up the same, and of course it does. And then now we get a break. We came up real short, so you'd expect us to, if we get a break, to be about that far outside on the other side. And we get that, and of course you get this setup, which is again similar to the one we saw here, and really kind of here as well. Or no, it's down here is where it is, where we got that little sideways stuff, and it tries to go lower. They're similar. I wouldn't call them all of those exact repeats, but they're similar. And fairly bullish bar. You expect it to test this high. And this is really a double top. So it looks like it's going to be a failed second entry long, pullback first entry, pullback second entry. And it turns out that it's a failed short, and you really got a double bottom that's a higher low. And off it goes. It's aggressive. It's not a great setup. I marked it green, and you really just don't get a nice chance to enter in that one. But then you're coming back down here, and you get that little double pattern. It looks like this one. It looks similar to this one. This one. Where was the other one? Here. And it goes higher. And you got a nice little small bar there for a change. 2 ticks. And really your stop has to go below this one. There's a little bit of sideways there, but I still like that one because this short-term trend line, that's the first break. We tried to go lower there, and we actually made a new low, and then it turns up. And there's actually a lower high here than that one. So it's a move down first entry, then a pullback, and a second entry long. So it's not an easy to see second entry, but it is one. And then, of course, you make the new high. There's this second entry long right here with another real small bar. But, you know, I just don't think with that trend line working down, that being the first break, and you can see it would have worked, but it comes back and makes that newer low, and it bounces right off what you would think may be the trend line across there. Especially if you drug it up here at the top, you can see it fits up here at the top. If you just drew it off those first few swings, and you might have had it a little steeper, but it wouldn't have fit up here. You don't really have this confirmed, but you got enough with this trend line coming down the break and 2 moves down and a new low. You got enough to consider, hey, I may go long there. And that is a second entry counting from here. You could look at this like a double top again and a first entry, second entry. So there's some reasons. I ended up adjusting that some for those closes. Then we're heading down again. And at this point, we've been pretty steep, so I'm not as crazy about getting short. If you'd had a good setup here, I would have considered it. But this is actually the failed second entry long is here, and so you don't want to go short there with those 2 bars and, you know, lots of stem on both sides, and then you get another one here, and then the same thing. So even though that's a failed second entry long, I don't think I would go short there with the EMA being that flat and the bar stacking up. And you can see you probably would have gotten trapped and stopped out. It ends up coming on down, but it broke higher a couple of times too. And I wouldn't be trying to get long in here either. I'd want it to come back to the key entry point down here and restart. And so you do get a couple of closes outside. But the reason I like this one is you come down, you touch the key entry point, 2 bearish to a neutral bar, then you get a first entry. That's a higher low, but you don't have really a real clear break and attempt at a new low yet. So I'd wait on a failed second entry short, which comes here, and so I like that one. And it takes off this time. There's actually another bounce here, but you're just going long right into all that resistance there. For some reason, it's finding real strong resistance there. So you finally get a break. There's a second entry long right here, but again, a very neutral bar. So I don't see a good way to enter that one either. Turns down off the top. You got a break, move to a new high, fairly small bar. But you need a lower high, really, so I marked that one green. And you don't get one. It just drops straight down. And then it closes outside, tries to go lower, and bounces right at that line. I like that one. That's also 2 tried to go lower again there. And a nice bullish bar. It got enough for a scalp. It didn't go very far, and then it turns down. And you finally get a close outside this trend line, and it moves up. First entry short, second entry short, and it finally breaks higher right there. I like that one. Looking for it to come back up here. You don't know that it's going to do this. You're just looking for it to come back to the upper side, but this thing just keeps going. So that turned out to be a nice short trap right there. And that's why you got to be careful getting short, even on a channel like this without a really good setup. And that's why that one's green, because there's another one here. I didn't even draw the line here, but you can see that you get a little close outside in UI. That's a pretty bearish bar, but you didn't have the information. That was just the first two swings, and you really only had two swings down here, so you didn't have a whole lot of information that maybe this was a sure thing on this channel yet. But when it comes up here and turns down off of it again, now you got a little more evidence. So, but this takes off, and it just keeps going. And I don't think you want to be entering up through here this far away from the EMA, bouncing off this upper channel. You finally come back and get a second entry long right here with a nice bullish bar. I like that one. Easy trade, but it doesn't go very far. And you can see there's a little bit of a trend line working up through there. But get it where it really goes there. I don't see any nice setups that I like there. Failed second entry short here. And you could have maybe entered there, but this is more sideways. And that's when you got to be real careful. And again, it's just going sideways. And even though we're making lower highs and higher lows, I just don't see anything I really like on that. It looks a little better right there, but it still doesn't fit really nicely. But that's probably closer to the real thing, but it just doesn't fit real nicely. So and we do have a close outside and new high here, so you would expect it to maybe sell off. It was late in the day, but really I should have marked this one, because you move down, you get a first entry, you shoot right through the MA, you pull back to that key entry point, and you get a second entry. The reason I didn't like it was at the low of the day, and there is, or I shouldn't say the low of the day, but that's the low of the move. I mean, if you move this all the way over to the right-hand side of the chart, you can see what that looks like. And there is some support right across through here. But it's a failed second entry long, and it's a nice bearish bar. So you make, and it actually went up and turns and goes out the other side. So you might consider it. And that would have been the last one of the day. Now really, this one is like really almost borderline red. You could almost, it probably should be green, because I didn't even really mark it before, but there's some reasons, to like it. And but if you're looking at that at the far right hand side of the chart during live, you can see that, hey, if there is a trend channel here, that might be the first break, and we may quickly go higher. You got to go short right into that low with no room to scalp out. And you notice it did break lower and try to back up, but that trend line held, it turned down again. So, but you could consider it. It does fit some of the criteria. So, but that's what I saw today. Not a lot of trade, still a lot of volatility. Not as bad as what we have seen, but still some big. The bars are still fairly big, and the whole, the whole same thing. The volatility is still high, just a little bit different than what we have. I mean, this was an easier day because it was all uphill, really. Once we got to this point, it's really all uphill, right up through here. And this one's a little steep. It's not as steep as some of them you see where it stays above the MA forever, but that's not a 45-degree angle runs more from corner to corner. And so this one's a little steep, and then this one's a little flat. And then this one's too steep again. This last little jog right up through here was probably the closest to a 45-degree angle. And I mean, and just in case you hadn't heard me say it, a healthy trend is a pretty much follows a 45-degree angle. If it's steeper than that, it's too steep, it's too strong, and it's probably not going to hold for very long. And if it's flatter than that, that means it's not as strong. So this is a little bit of a correction after this break and a new high, but there just wasn't anybody really selling strong, so it turns out to go higher. And the same thing coming down, you want a 45-degree angle, and if it's too steep, it's probably not going to like this. It's not going to last very long. And if it's too flat, then then it's not a very strong or healthy trend. So that angle really tells you some important information, so keep that in mind. But I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow and wrap up our week. But I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.